Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Peace and guidance, greetings. Good afternoon, everyone. Um, but I hope everyone is at home, spending time with their families, quality time, that is, and tending to those stuff that you would have, you know, shelved over the past years and months and weeks, thinking that it was not important. Not that it wasn't, but at the time when everybody was busy and running about and getting your business done and taking care of things that would have gotten us by then. Now our whole situation has changed, and we are now left with a total different dynamic, and our lives have been changed tremendously. Phenomenal changes has taken place in terms of the way we communicate, the way we speak with one another, the way we interact with one another, the way we do business, the way we worship, the way we work, and all these things. Yes, we are seeing a number of good things that is coming out of this whole experience. A number of lessons we're being taught. Most importantly, we're being taught a number of important lessons as it relates to humility. This situation has humbled us to the point where we are beginning to recognize the efforts of those individuals whom before we never recognized before. Persons like garbage collectors or cleaners, security officers, the healthcare professionals, nurses, caretakers and so on, caregivers and so on. And we are almost at that point, if not there already, where we are certainly having a different outlook on life as it is. And we are beginning to realize that planning for tomorrow is even more challenging now than it was before. Anyways, so a lot has been happening, and we see where the numbers are increasing, and that is not a good sign. We are also seeing where we are at the stage of community spread, I believe, and that is not good news at all. So we are at a point where we don't know where this is actually going to lead us, and when would we find relief and be able to actually take control of this pandemic that has affected our lives so phenomenally. So with that said, I want to look at some of the initiatives and policies that has been put in place by our government, and I must say and commend them for the efforts that they are making, and the decisions, hard decisions and choices that they have to make, and in getting us where we are now. Having said that, we are at a point where the numbers have increased, and I am not too certain if it is we want to blame those figures on our government, or should we blame those figures on our own selves and the way we, you know, responded to this pandemic, now that it has, you know, appeared in our country. But let's not talk too much about that and play that blame game at this point in time. What I want to emphasize upon is the responsibilities that each and every one has as individuals, as families, family units, communities, close-knit societies. You know, let's talk about, what we, as a responsible people, ought to be doing, and how it is we ought to be responding to this scourge that has come upon us. Now we've seen before the advent of this pandemic here in Trinidad, ending of January, we've had the Minister of Health indicating to us that they have been planning and putting, stringent measures in place to actually deal with this this virus when it does, shows its face here in Trinidad and Tobago. So long before we had the first case, they were looking at a number of initiatives and preparing themselves to respond in the event that it does present itself here. So, looking forward, I would have thought that, the influx of people coming in from abroad for carnival celebrations, apart from, putting a cap on individuals or persons coming from China, or flights coming in from China, apart from looking at that, we should have also been looking at other nationals coming from other countries into Trinidad and Tobago, because the virus was already, in those other countries also. And we have to take into consideration that this virus did not only dawn on us at the end of December last year when it was announced by China. It was long before that. It was since in October, November, when the Chinese knew that they had a problem on their hands. And, that information was kept from the rest of the world. And Chinese nationals continue to travel and visit other countries and interact with other persons and individuals and so on from other countries. And so it would have been introduced by that means. And, once that started happening and people continue to travel, this is exactly what it is we're going to find out. We're going to find happening now. And so the government at the time did not see the necessity in curbing those or restricting travel from other countries before the carnival celebrations, nor did they find it necessary to postpone or cancel our carnival celebrations. All right, so we went past that point. Now we have gone into different phases where the government incrementally introduce measures and mechanisms to try to put a handle on the spread of the disease and so on and so forth. Oftentimes they would mention that all the cases were imported, and we do have a number of cases of course that was imported. We have those persons who would have tested positive coming in from other countries, having traveled and so on. We saw that situation that took place with Ian Allen. He didn't find it necessary to quarantined himself. He went to his personal doctor, who indicated to him it was just a mild cold, and his resistance was down. And so he continued to move around and interact with persons and so on. And um, eventually, he was tested positive, according to him. We have not been given the information or given any positive information as regards to whether or not this test was done by CAFA, and it was in fact, you know, it is in fact true that he is or has been tested positive by CAFA, which is oftentimes said by the CMO and the Minister of Health that they are the only reputable, the only recognized testing facility for Trinidad and Tobago. So we had other instances where the pundit in Davie, he would have traveled and come into the country. We had another situation in Williamsville, I think it was, where you know, there was a gathering and persons would have traveled in to Trinidad and Tobago and attended that gathering, and a number of other instances. We have the situation that took place in Tobago, you know, so we are continuously finding ourselves bombarded with persons coming into our country, being allowed to come into our country from other countries that had this virus existing already. So it was inevitable that you know, one would think that, you know, we would not have been exposed to it. As a matter of fact, if I recall correctly, the Minister of Health did in fact say that our first case is going to be an imported case. All right, he did in fact said that. So they knew what was going to happen. So we started to hear about this other stage, which you're calling, you know, local spread, and that was explained in detail what local spread was. That's, you know, persons who would have been in contact with someone who have had it before, traveled before, and they come in contact with other individuals, etc., etc. And so we had, you know, primary those primary infections, secondary infections, local spread, and now we're hearing about community spread, where there was no indication who these persons would have come into contact with, and here's where the whole task of tracing becomes even more difficult. So we are not in a very good place. We are not in a very good place. And just this morning, we are getting reports from the mainstream media that there was this protest action down in Brooklyn settlement in Sange Grande, where the residents have come to find out that the government had actually rented a facility there to house some of you know, elderly patients who seem to have come out of, or has more or less is no longer, you know, exhibiting signs of the COVID-19, so they are on their way to full recovery, but they cannot be released or sent home because the testing for that confirmation is yet to be done. So until such time, they said that they would house them in this facility in Brooklyn settlement in Sange Grande. The residents there was never informed about it, and there was no consultation. So they just went in there and said that, okay, this is what is going to happen. Of course, the residents they were very you know, annoyed about the situation, and they decided that they're going to, you know, protest about it and you know, express their concerns, you know, indicating that they are being actually put on, you know, under risk, you know, and their community now has been compromised. So let's talk about that. Now, first of all, we have to understand, when we look at the map of Trinidad and Tobago, that map has been circulating, where they've indicated where the concentration of the COVID-19 infections are. And we see up in the north, we see in central, San Fernando, and those places, and so on. Places that, in and around the airport area, St. Helena, Caroni, that area, and so on. That that red circle is actually very large in that area. So, and when we look at the rest of Trinidad and Tobago, Sange Grande, country areas, and those places, and so on, there is no evidence of COVID-19 there, or individuals having COVID-19 in those areas. So, point being that I understand the residents and the who who are living there in that settlement, in that community, and I understand their fears and I understand their concerns, and I support their call for the government to rethink their position in putting those persons there. Now we have to understand that we have seen a second wave of this virus in China, where persons who would have been tested free from the COVID-19 and allowed to go home, they have in fact gotten the COVID-19 again and became reinfected by the COVID-19, and apparently the virus has mutated itself and reinfected these individuals, and we've seen a second wave of this thing happening in China. There are other reports that came out from the World Health Organization and other like institutions indicating that there are some cases where the people tested out of the 14-day incubation period showed up positive with the COVID-19. So it actually tells us that there is a possibility that even though these patients are what you would call it considered, out of that risk, that high risk area of actually having the COVID-19, they're actually now in a situation where they're close to recovery. But we can't say for sure, right? The government of this country, the Ministry of Health and the CMO and all the medical practitioners, they are uncertain whether or not this virus does pose a threat even after people has recovered from it. So yes, you're actually introducing a risk factor into the Brooklyn settlement in Sange Grande because of the fact that there is no evidence of persons having this COVID-19 in that particular area. Why would you want to risk it at this point in time? Now, the CMO have clearly stated that there is no reason to be fearful, there is no reason to be concerned about it, and so on. And promises are being made that they are going to ensure that this thing is contained and it's not going to affect the residents in Sange Grande and so on. But were we not saying the same thing before we reached this point where we have where our figures are continue to rise? Were we not saying it before that we want to assure that we don't want to get to the point of community spread? We want to assure that we don't want to get to the point of local spread and all of this. All right. So it is not consistent with what you were saying before, and it's not consistent with the idea that persons, these individuals would not be a risk, um, uh, in this community. So um, my thing is that I think the government in this particular case should rethink their position, and they should actually there are so many other options that they have. We have we have a lot of buildings that you know Petrochin um, had owned that I think could very well be used um, for this purpose. I think there are many government buildings or um, you know um, buildings that would have belonged to Caroni 1975 Limited. I don't know what conditions those buildings are in at this point in time, but and there are other areas in Trinidad and Tobago where, like for instance, where they took those people to Balandra before. There are many other areas where they're less populated, and it could be more manageable in terms of containing if there is the possibility of a spread or the possibility of someone escaping from the facility or leaving the facility without you know properly being released and so on. So there's always these issues that one needs to consider, and it's like if it is you have your home, your family home, and you you're very careful of who you invite into your home. Would you invite a person that you um, that has a history of criminal behavior? Would you do that? You would not, because you would not want to expose your family or your home or the surrounding of your home or the location of your home to this individual, because there's a possibility that this individual having a history of criminality would perhaps get his friends or his cohorts to come and rob you at a later date, or come and take from you what he things that he would see that you have and that sort of thing. So you're putting your family and you're putting your home at risk by bringing someone who has these tendencies. So the same thing applies here. Why and what was the rationale that the government is using to bring those people in there? And now you're putting the TTPS in a situation, a volatile situation, to deal with the residents of this community. And the TTPS now would have, they would appear to be as the doing the dirty work for the government and the Ministry of Health and so on, because it's the TTPS who has to take the flak from the residents and has to answer these questions the residents are asking. Why would you want to put an institution as the TTPS, who are struggling to rebrand themselves and to create an image of themselves that is conducive to the society and the acceptance of the general public and so on? An institution that is constantly challenged with bettering their image and improving on their image and so on, especially in recent times when we have seen so many of police officers involved in criminal activity and what have you and so on. And just recently, that video that went viral, police officers breaching the authority and overstepping the authority and misbehaving in public the way they did, given alcoholic drinks to the person who was in the street there, and having him run and push-ups and all these things and so on and so forth. So why would you want to do that? Why would you want to put the TTPS in that position? What are you causing to happen here? And I'm urging the government to be very careful. You're stepping on uncharted territory here, and you have no idea what is going to trigger the population of this country to rise up against you. You have no idea whatsoever. This is you don't know what would be the tipping point that will cause the citizens of this country to rise up against you. This is uncharted territory. Do not make that mistake. Whatever you do, the communities that does not have the COVID-19, do not attempt to take anyone who has or had the COVID-19 into those communities. Do not do it. You are making a very big mistake, and you're putting the TTPS in a position that is not going to end well. I am telling you. All right? Gary Griffith, the Commissioner of Police, has enough on his plate at this point in time. You don't want to give him more work as it is. All right? Let us be careful. Let us be mindful, and let us be cautious of how it is you move forward. And I'm calling on the government not to. All those areas in Trinidad and Tobago where there's no COVID-19, people are being cautious, people are staying in their homes, people are trying to abide with the policies that are being put in place. And if it is they are staying at home because they do not want to expose themselves to the risk of getting the COVID-19, why are you taking it to them? Why are you taking it to them? And this is my point. This is my point. So I'm warning the government. Probably you're not seeing it, but I'm seeing it from where I sit and what I've dealt with in the past and continue to deal with. I understand what could happen. If it is you don't understand what could happen, I'm advising you now. Do not agitate the population of Trinidad and Tobago to rise up against you. Do not do it. All right? We know for a fact that we are in challenging times. We are experiencing a phenomenon that is strange to us. It's first time we are actually exposed to this type of thing. And it's a learning period for all of us. Take the advice. I'm sure you're being given the advice from different quarters, from different entities, from different individuals. Take the advice. If the resident says no, do not attempt to create that mistrust between you and the residents of this country. You're at a point right now where everything you do is under the microscope. Everything you say is under the microscope. The journalists are taking you to task for that. They're asking the tough questions. Do not put yourself in a position for the citizens of this country to say that you do not care for them and you do not have their health or you do not have their interests at hand. Do not do it. So I'm urging the government of this country. Again, I'm saying, do not put the TTPS in this position. You do not want another fight in your hands. This is enough as it is. All right? I even spoke to an attorney, and there's nothing stopping anyone from filing an injunction against the government from proceeding like this and doing things in this manner, haphazardly, not consulting and not having proper consultation and what have you. Right? But you know what's the challenge with that? The attorneys now have to go and make the application online. And you know what's the other challenge? A lot of the attorneys ask them. They're finding it difficult to get online to do this application or to do the application to do their job. Right? Judges are not coming to court. The magistrates are not coming to the courts. All right? They want to stay at home. All right? The police perhaps are reluctant now to charge individuals to take them to and lock them up in the police station, because what you'll be doing is that if it is the courts are not in session, the magistrates are not coming to court. You can't You can't violate the rights of these individuals because you need to place them before a court at the earliest possible time. That's according to our constitution. Those things have not been addressed as yet. So if these things are happening, why are you putting the police in this situation? Why are you doing this? Prime Minister Keith Rowley, I don't envy your position. Minister Terence Dialsing, I do not envy your position. Mr. Paraswaram, Dr. Paraswaram, I do not envy your position. But at the same point in time, you have a task, and a very important task at that. And you have the ability now to consult. Please use that option. Use that option. Listen to your people. Do not disregard the voices of the masses. Do not. Thank you.